Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, more stupid answers to sensible questions. It's episode 2 of Ask CriminOlly. Okay, so I have some more viewer questions to go through with you today. So as before, I'm going to try and answer 4 questions. I've got a lot more than 4 questions already, so thank you to everyone who submitted a question. I will get to them all eventually, I promise. I may have to ramp up the number of questions I answer per video, but we'll see how we go over the next few weeks. So do continue to ask questions if there's anything you want to know about books, about the channel, about anything at all. Just leave a comment on a video, prefacing it with Ask CriminOlly, or if you want to ask a question anonymously, you can email me at criminolly@gmail.com. Right, let's get on with the questions. Okay, so first question comes from MJ at the channel Reading This Life, and her question is, what is your system for reading? For example, planned daily page goals, dedicated reading times, etc. So I don't have a system in terms of something that's really thought through, which is probably kind of a metaphor for many things in my life. So basically, I tend to read in the morning before work and at the end of the day, and sometimes if I get a lunch break from work, I will read during my lunch break as well. And then at the weekends, basically I read during time I've got when I'm not doing stuff with my family or doing chores and things like that. So I really fit reading around my schedule rather than fitting my schedule around my reading, if that makes sense. But reading is my main leisure activity. I don't watch a lot of TV, for example. So in those kind of down times, I would tend to read rather than doing something different. I've tried to get away from having goals in terms of reading. It is something I was doing when I started the channel. So I would set up my TBR for the month quite religiously, and would know how many pages I had to read during the month to meet that TBR, and would therefore know roughly how many pages I needed to read a day. But even when I was doing that, I didn't really sweat it, in that I didn't think about how many. I didn't think, I haven't read enough pages this day. I just read, and it turned out most months that the TBR I'd set was roughly the right size. There are a few months when I didn't get through everything, but I don't sweat that too much. I'm trying to get away from having a TBR and just enjoying the books I've got around me a bit more. But when I'm doing reading events, and particularly for Garb August, because it's my reading event, I have set a TBR, and that's quite a stretching one. So I've got 6,000 pages I need to read, so I will probably give it a bit more focus than I normally do in August. But then I'm looking forward for the rest of the year to not worrying about it at all and just reading what I like, really. Okay, hopefully that answered the question, MJ. Okay, next question then is from It Came From The Page, and he has asked, exactly how many books did you buy for Garb August? So the main reason I didn't answer this question in the first Ask CriminOlly video was that I hadn't had time to count them all. So I have now done that, and the number is 138. Which is quite a large number, isn't it? And probably far larger than it needed to be. And in my defence, I did buy quite a lot of those books. I bought with the intention of doing giveaways and things like that. So I was never expecting to read all of them. But I probably will read many of them, either in August or, I've read quite a few of them in the run up to August as well. So yeah, we'll see how I get on getting through that 138. A big chunk of that, obviously 39 of that, is a job lot of NASCAR Harlequin romances, which is on its way to me now and will probably arrive either today or tomorrow. So I will I'll do a book haul video of those when they arrive. So yes, the simple answer to the question, how many books did you buy for Garb August, is too many. Okay, next question is from Michael K. Vaughan. Michael has already chased me up demanding an answer to this question, so he clearly needs the answer pronto. His question is, what is the best way to get rid of a dead body? Asking for a friend. So I'm hoping, Michael, that the friend isn't Roger and that you're not planning on getting rid of Roger, because that would be terrible and I think would hurt your channel hugely. I absolutely love Roger. So yes, please don't get rid of Roger. A not really serious but kind of more serious answer to the question is I'm a really a big fan of like recycling and reusing things, and I think it's important that we do everything we do, in an ecologically friendly and sensible way. So I would recommend burying the body in the ground so that it can, naturally decompose and enrich the soil and, help new life grow and things like that. So yes, that's my answer to your question. Okay, final question then is from Angela405, and her question, which is quite a long one, is how does trashy literature from different countries compare? Aside from pop culture type topics, which I assume are going to differ wildly, are there thematic differences, differences in quality, differences in the sheer number of trashy titles produced? In your opinion, in the trashy literature Olympics, which country would win the gold medal? So this is a really, really interesting question, and it's one that I don't think I can give a complete answer to. And the reason for that is a really simple one, which is trashy books, by their very nature, are quite disposable and would typically not be translated. So I think probably a lot of English, or a lot of trashy books written in English, have been translated into other languages when they get successful. But trashy books from other cultures tend not to be translated into English. I think the one exception to that, which I think is quite an interesting one and worth talking about, is manga. So I think a lot of manga from Japan is quite trashy. So a lot of manga, is very focused on sex and violence and things like that. I mean, obviously a lot isn't as well. But the first wave of manga coming over to the West, I think, and particularly like anime films, particularly honed in on that, extreme violence end of the manga spectrum. And nowadays we're seeing a much broader range of things coming over from Japan and being translated. A lot of kind of romance manga and things like that. But in the early days, it was very much focused on the more violent end of the spectrum. So I think manga is an interesting type of trashy literature. It's very clearly made to be read quickly. It's mass produced. They churn out these massive volumes, every week in Japan, in a lot of the ongoing publications, and a lot of the content is quite sensationalist. So manga is one example where I think we do have a pretty good sense of it in the West. Probably not a complete sense, but a better sense of it. But I'm sure there are many, many books that are published in, like Spanish and French and German and things like that. Which and probably, I would imagine there's probably quite a big kind of trash literature culture in places like India and China as well. Big, very populated countries where there's probably quite a demand for accessible, enjoyable, disposable literature. And I've got no sense of that at all. So I don't really think I can answer the question that completely. I think what I can do is talk about what I do know. So I do know that there's quite a big trash literature, interest, or a lot of trash literature is published in France, and I know that because I know that quite a lot of trashy books that I've enjoyed that were in English have been translated into French. So the Survivalist series, which I really like, was translated into French, and indeed there are they continued the story in France beyond beyond the books that were written by Jerry Ahern. So they translated all of the Jerry Ahern ones, and then there are more books in the series in France which are only available in French, which I wish would be translated because I'd love to read them. And similarly, there's a quite well-known series of horror books in France, published under the title, or the series was called the Gore series, where a lot of English and American horror novels were translated by people like Sean Hudson. You know, those kind of authors were translated and published in this line in France. So I think in France there's probably quite a decent amount of trashy literature, and I'm sure there is in Spain as well, just given how many Spanish speaking people there are in the world. But yeah, I just don't have sight of that, unfortunately. So in terms of comparing England and America, which are probably the two that I know most about, I think really it comes down to local differences in terms of what people in those countries are obsessed with at the time. And as I've said before in my definitions of trash literature, I think a lot of trash literature is published to cash in on a public concern or public interest at the time. So I think a really good example of that, which I've talked about on the channel before, is the Skinhead books by Richard Allen, which were published in the UK in the 70s, which really tap into that British fear of skinhead culture and youth culture, which I don't believe they were published in the States, because that same fear, public concern, didn't exist in the States. What you get a lot more of in the States is Hell's Angels type literature. So you see that that kind of regional cultural difference. I think definitely turns up quite a lot in trash fiction, because of the fact that it is written to meet a demand in the public in the country it's published in. But aside from that, I think the general themes of trash are probably quite universal. Interest in kind of crime and kind of depictions of sex and violence and things like that. I think are universal. Everyone loves a bit of sex and violence, don't they? So I don't think there are huge differences. I think the other thing is, I think Hollywood has a huge influence on trash literature. So what is popular in cinema they'll end up being trashy books that are in a similar vein. And obviously, as Hollywood rules the cinema world in the English-speaking world, at least, I think that means that a lot of trash that's published in English-speaking countries internationally has a heavy American influence. So yeah. So sorry, that was a really, really rambly answer. So the final point of the question then. So in the trashy literature Olympics, which country would win the gold medal? I think. And this is personal, so I think it will be England. So I think there's something about the way English publishers, and I say English rather than British deliberately, English publishers did trashy fiction in the 70s and 80s particularly. And I'm really thinking about New English Library in particular, which just churned out so much trash, very quickly, with small groups of writers using multiple pseudonyms and just going at it. So I think that's, for me, is kind of the pinnacle of trash publishing, is the New English Library output in the 70s and 80s. So yeah, I'm gonna be patriotic on this one and go with England. Okay, time for another random book from the shelves. So today I have picked The Abominable by Dan Simmons, which is another huge historical horror novel from Simmons. So this one I think isn't quite as long as The Terror, but it's over 700 pages. Obviously I've talked about The Terror on the channel recently. Really, really enjoyed it. Really interested to read some more Dan Simmons books as a result. So I have both this and Drood by Simmons on my TBR to read soon. I won't be able to read them in August or September probably, but I do intend to give both of them a try before the end of the year. So yeah, let me know if you've read this one and what you thought of it. Okay, thank you very much for watching the second episode of Ask CriminOlly. I hope you enjoyed it and found the answers interesting. I'm sorry the last answer was very, very rambly, wasn't it? But hopefully there were some nuggets of interest in there at least. So yeah, if you have questions, do ask them either in the comments or via email, and I will get to them all eventually, I promise. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.